Hi everyone. I'm really happy to be here this afternoon. As Michaela said, I have 5 little ones. So last year when I was here, that was my first Fiat conference. And if you were here last year, you'd remember seeing me at the back for most of the entire conference, just bouncing and rocking my little guy. So he was 6 weeks old at the time, and now he's a year old, so I can actually be here. And yeah, I guess last year was such a grace. I didn't know how much I needed this until I was here, and all the sacraments that they offer, and the community and being around other Catholic faithful women. It's quite incredible. So I want to thank Fiat for giving us this grace. Yeah, I'm happy to be here as a speaker this year. And my talk today is about divine providence, and I'll be giving a tale of 3 Fiats. So just a little bit about me is, as Michaela said, I was born in Nigeria. Nigeria is in West Africa. When I was 3, I fell suddenly ill. It started as a fever, and it just quickly progressed. Before long, I wasn't able to walk again. So doctors in Nigeria didn't know what was wrong. They were doing all these invasive procedures. I still have the scars to show it, but they didn't know what they were looking for. They were just trying to do something, I guess. And I was dying. Time was going by, and their efforts were all in vain. So my grandfather, Mbu, was Nigeria's ambassador to Germany at the time. Because of this privilege, my mom and I were able to secure visas, and we came to America. My 3 brothers and father were not able to get those visas, so that's the first Fiat of this story. My mom said, yes, I recognize this is what I need to do. I have to leave my other children, I have to leave my husband, I have to leave the only life that she had known, but this is what needs to be done for my daughter to live, so yes. And God bless her, because she brought me to New York. We were at Long Island at St. Charles Hospital, and the doctors really quickly figured it out. Like, it's osteomyelitis, we don't know where it came from. It's just, something that progressed pretty quickly, so the damage was done. They didn't think that I would live through it, so they warned my mother, but she stood fervently, and I'm a mother now, so I can't imagine what this would look like, and I prayed that I would have the same grace that she had through it. But she never wavered. She was so confident, and I was 3 years old, so I don't have a lot of memories of this, but I do remember seeing my mom at my bedside saying the rosary, and that's an image that'll always stick with me. And I remember very strongly the smell of hospital bacon. And I walk into a hospital, I'm like, there's that bacon, anyways, I digress. But the doctors didn't think that I would pull through, and lo and behold, I did. I was in a hospital for a year.
Wow.
The doctors and nurses became my friends, and after a year I did learn to walk again, and I walked out of there by God's grace. But it had progressed so far that I needed to see the doctor every 6 months. So we basically had to leave our lives in Nigeria behind. So knowing that that was what she needed to do, my mom just needed to start from the beginning. She was a very intelligent, very accomplished woman. She went to college in Trinity, Dublin, and she had a great career in Nigeria, but here she is in this new country now, and she had to start all over. So she, in her humility, she was cleaning homes, whatever she needed to do to take care of us, and she did it. And God bless her. She's just such an example for me now as a mother of what it is to just really be faithful in the face of adversity. And the worst thing as a parent is just looking at your child and knowing that they're ill and not knowing that you can really do anything about it, and just surrendering them over to God. So my mom and I grew up in Cleveland. She went back to school, and we're actually in college at the same time. It's kind of funny. And I just admired her so much, because obviously she was in college in the 60s. And here it's a whole new world of education. She's like, what is Blackboard? It's Blackboard, but it's on the computer. And I said, okay, we'll figure this out. And I loved it because after a while, like she very quickly like caught on to like how to use the computer, so much so that I would like walk past her in front of the computer and she's just like, Muji, come look at this. And she's looking at these like European comedies and they're like, oh, she's pranking this person. I'm like, Mom, okay, like you've definitely gone further in your computer use. But it was wonderful. So we grew up in Ohio and my mom just found her calling in special education. She received her master's in special education from Cleveland State University, and she became just a wonderful teacher for these students that oftentimes came from really difficult family backgrounds, an absent father or just a mother who's working a lot, and just they needed her. God put her in that position in his providence, and I loved when she would tell me stories like on the first day of school about students that were just, very hard-headed, making fun of her accent and all these stories. I'm like, oh man, like I don't envy you. But I used to love just seeing the progression throughout the year and just kind of like updating me like, oh, like this student like said that, that I was like the best teacher ever. And oh, like that's the same student in the beginning of the year. And just like, without fail, she had these stories year after year after year. She was brilliant. So my mom found her calling, certainly found her calling as an educator. So after I received my degrees, I decided that it was time for me to spread my wings. And my mom and I obviously, like, in this short time, you kind of understand that we were very close, right? And I'm like, okay, I think I want to leave. I'm going to go to LA. My degrees were in journalism and promotional communications. So I'm like, oh, LA is like a good place to learn about communications. Like, let's go there. It's going to be easy. So I went to LA, and after a while, I did get a wonderful job at an agency that I won't name, but one of the biggest, talent agencies representing all the A-list celebrities and all of that. But it was like the belly of the beast, right? Like, like I don't even remember applying to this place. It was, Providence is something, right? Like, they're like, oh, come in for this interview. I'm like, yeah, definitely remember applying to you. And I walked in and I'm seeing like people that I grew up watching on TV, and it was just such a surreal experience. And I was there for about 2.5 years, and man, that was an experience that I think really changed my faith for me, because it was so secular. It was so anti all the things that I was raised, and I was raised Catholic, like to believe in. And it looked so glittery on the surface, and it looked amazing. And this is a place that everyone in LA, in Hollywood, like wants to work. And I work there. Like, how cool is that? But in reality, it actually Shia LaBeouf quoted when I worked there. Shia LaBeouf was one of their clients, and he came in, and then he's a convert now, so it's really something, right? He came in and he was at a meeting at our agency, and in one of like the rooms, and he was like, it's cold in here. And they're like, oh, like, do you want us to like turn like the air up? And he was like, no, it's emotionally cold. Wow. All right, Shia, you knew what was happening. So yeah, I just realized like I don't want this. This was a period, and I think a lot of, if you are someone who grew up as a cradle Catholic, this is sometimes what happens. At least for me, I didn't necessarily understand why I was Catholic, and I think especially because I come from a culture that is so Catholic, like it's so ingrained in like our culture, but there isn't necessarily enough formation. Like, it's beautiful, like we're living it, like it's in our home, we're saying the rosary, we're going to mass, we're doing all these things, but there's something so critical about actually like properly catechizing like our children, and it's something that I missed. So this was a point where I was like, well, why? Like, I figured that out, because otherwise, like, I feel like it's part of the reason so many people leave the faith. Like, they may not necessarily even know, because why is it that different from Protestantism? Like, so I deep dived into Catholicism, and it's great because we have these resources like Catholic Answers and the internet that helps us out. And it was beautiful, and I realized like, okay, I get it, and this is not for me. So here comes Providence again. My mom calls me, and when she was a child, she fell out of a mango tree. She was very adventurous, and since then, since she was a teenager, she had debilitating like back pain. always had back issues and something that she just always lived with. And she called me around this time when I was having this realization, like, this isn't the place for me. And she told me that finally she was having the surgery that would remedy this. I was like, all right, I'm coming home. Let's go, easy decision. Like, and people were pushing back. You know, like before I made that decision, I was kind of talking to people, you know, definitely the wrong people. And I asked, like, well, what do you think I should do? Like, you know, my boss is priming me to become an agent. Like, I could have a really bright future here potentially, even though I knew, like, that's not really what I wanted. It was, like, still kind of like a learning, you know? And my friend said, I mean, I love my mom too, but I'm not gonna give up my whole career for her. And I was like, all right, that's the wrong advice, I'm going home. And thank God that I did, because the surgery was delayed by a year. When the year did come, she had the surgery and it was successful. I want to tell one anecdote that I feel like I'm so grateful for, and the Holy Spirit I felt really spoke in that moment is when she was going in for her surgery, I was sitting at her bedside, and you know, sometimes you hear that little knock, and it's like, why do I feel like I want to say this thing? Like, I guess I'm gonna say it. And then oftentimes when we follow that nudge, like, I don't think it's something that we ever actually do, because that's the Holy Spirit talking. And what was going through my mind and what I felt like I was being called to say was the fact that I had met this guy on Catholic Match, right? Whenever my priest told me, check it out, they have Catholic members. Okay, because I'm having a hard time meeting other faithful Catholics in general. I didn't grow up in a community like this, and I definitely was not seeing a lot of faithful Catholic men in my community. So out of obedience, I went up to Catholic Match, and you know, I started communicating with this guy, and I was thinking about it. We never even met in person at that point. Like, we were just communicating, and something was just telling me, like, what if, like, God forbid, what if something happened to your mom? What if something happened to her? And what if, crazily, like, an even weirder thought, what if this is your husband? And like, you didn't tell her. You had this moment, and you could tell her. And I just kind of like sat there, just like having this like weird conversation with myself in my head, like as my mom was about to get pulled in. And then finally I just like surrendered and I told her. And I'm like, all right, Mom, I prefaced it like, calm down already. Like, we haven't even met yet, don't get too excited. But yada, yada, yada. I met this man and his family is saying a rosary for you. And she's like, ooh. Calm down. Anyways, that man did end up being my husband. So Catholic Match, yeah, and I'm gonna single people out there, but apparently it works, I don't know. So, yes, my mom had her surgery, and the surgery was successful, but during the recovery, she ended up passing away. It was unexpected, completely unexpected. I mean, there were so many moments where I was like, this is the day that my mom, I loved her so much, we all love our moms, right? I was like, this is the day. Like, just this like anxious kid, this is the day that like my best friend is gone. And it was never, you know, but then the day it actually happened, I just didn't see it coming, but it was such grace, let me just say. Like, I was there, I was next to her, I prayed with her, and it was beautiful. It was gut-wrenching and all those things, but frankly, like, I was shrouded with so much grace that the worst thing imaginable happened to me, and somehow I felt protected. I felt a weird peace, and it enveloped our entire family. I think that's also where prayer comes in, right? Because we had so many people praying with us. So my mom's Fiat brought me here, and I'm so glad that I was able to be there with her in her final moments. And after she passed away, about a year later, my husband and I got married, and we had our first daughter. Actually, we had our daughter 9 months to the day of our wedding.
Wow.
On the 100th anniversary of Our Lady of Fatima. And we named her after my mom, Maggie Okaja. So yes, it was such a gift to be able to now have a family of my own. I mean, that's God's providence, right? Like he saw he planned it, obviously. So, but I mean, he was just priming me to be spiritually strong enough, to recognize when a good man was in front of me, that I needed a good Catholic spouse, that was going to be the spouse to get me through, what he knew was going to happen. I mean, it's amazing. And before our daughter was born, I was working for different charitable nonprofits. My first nonprofit I worked for was actually at that agency, interestingly enough. So the agent was in the foundation and speakers department. That was my boss. Like it's just funny. Now running my own foundation and now speaking to you, right? And I realized like, okay, I don't like this setting. I don't like this industry, but I love that they tried to do some good, and I want to do that, So I went on to work for various nonprofits, and actually when I was pretty heavily pregnant with Maggie, I worked at a nonprofit in Santa Barbara. And my husband and I were talking, and I was like, I really would like to be at home, with our kids. I don't think I want to work anymore. Here comes Providence again, right? My aunt gave me a call. And this is the second Fiat of the story. So my aunt gave her Fiat 17 years ago. Well, I guess her true Fiat in becoming a religious sister, that was 56 years ago. But the specific Fiat that I'm talking about in this story is her decision to start an orphanage. So she had been a religious sister for many, many years. And they asked her, like, okay, like you're older now. What do you want to do with the remainder? It's not career. That's definitely not the term. But what would you like to do for the remainder of your time here, like as a sister? And she said, I want to start an orphanage. There are all these children here. This was the height of the AIDS epidemic, so there were just a lot of orphan children on the street, and she was seeing it, and she made this decision and said, okay, let's do this. So she founded Divine Providence Home in 2007. And since their founding, they've taken in over 200 orphaned, abandoned, vulnerable children. And I mean, that's a big Fiat, right? And they call her grandma. She's incredible. And they were at risk of having their doors closed because I don't know how much you guys know about the Nigerian government, but they're not very good. And there was just so much suffering. They initially were giving them funding, and they just ceased it. They just completely halted it, and they already had a lot of children in their care. So what is she supposed to do? So she was at risk of having their doors closed, and these kids I guess they would be homeless again, right? And it's interesting because I don't even remember. I remember there was a conversation had, but it wasn't even like a significant moment. Like I can't recall it to such a degree. I just know that okay. She said this, I know how to do that. I got you, so I started a 501c3, and my husband and I spoke. We're like, let's do this, we can do this. And I founded the Okada Foundation, so named after my mom's memory, and with the initial goal of keeping their doors open. And we founded that in 2017, and we've done that every year since. So year after year, we're constantly fundraising, to make sure that the sisters are never in a position where they have to wonder if they can take a child in, so they never have the fear of potentially having to let these children go because there's no longer shelter there. This is what we do. We're here, and it's one orphanage, right? But it's a community effort, and we've been doing it together since 2017, and we're doing what we can to create more opportunities for the kids. So we're funding different programs. One thing that we saw was that these kids have experienced such varying degrees of trauma. They've either been orphaned, abandoned, to whatever degree, their separation from their parents, right? How traumatic is that for any child? So we recognize, okay, we provided them with clean water and indoor plumbing, electricity. We're checking off those boxes of obviously just basic human necessities that they didn't have before. And we're like, okay, let's get them counseling. So we were able to get some religious sisters in, and they now have regular counseling, but with a based approach, right? And yeah, this is me, like mother of 5, doing this from my home, and honestly, it's just all by God's grace. Like people ask, like, oh, like where do you find the time, or how do you structure? And I'm like, haha, structure, be in my house. No, it's honestly, and to answer that question, if I could think of what the answer is, I'll give an example. Like preparing for this weekend, this was the week that I decided to pull my kids out of school and homeschool. So that was fun timing, but it was like, no, this is what my daughter needs, and my two of my children were in school, and it just didn't seem to be the right fit for one of my children, and Providence just very quickly made it happen, and we got into a charter, and I was like, okay, let's do this. So this was this past week, and there were so many times where I was like, okay, Fiat conference, yeah, that speech, let's figure that out. And it was just like, but I have to align things, right? Like I find that things always work best with my work if I place my family first, if I place my children first, my husband first, our home first, right? Otherwise, it would be so disordered. Otherwise, I don't know if the grace would be there to the degree that the grace is there. And I see it because when I'm heavily pregnant with a child, I'm like, I don't have time to fundraise, or I don't have time to plan this gala, like I don't have, and then in comes Providence again with this very generous person who wants to, give us the money to do the exact thing that we needed to do. And I was like, oh, so you're just taking care of this, huh? And I just feel like it's just, I'm trying to cooperate, but there's so much grace being given, and that ordering of things, I'm finding is just so important. It's so important as mothers to make that, even if you're a working mother, it's just like that order, and just recognizing that our children need what they need, and that those needs will vary. But once we attend to those needs, like everything else just seems to fall into place. So I just wanted to share that little tidbit. But Sister Rita's Fiat led to my Fiat and starting the foundation, and all of it has been such a grace. So I wanted to say that those are 3 big Fiats, right? Yeses that completely changed the trajectory of my life, my mom's life, my aunt's life, and the children from my Providence home, my brothers, like so many lives were affected. So you can look at that and think, okay, those are big Fiats. Just as important though are the small everyday Fiats. In these we are called to offer up our acceptance of life's daily challenges, and are called to put ourselves aside in service of our family, cleaning that room that we just cleaned up, those Legos we just picked up, doing it over and over and over again. But these are just such great opportunities for us. And we put ourselves aside in service for our family, our friends, our co-workers, and even maybe especially those whom we find it difficult to serve. And although these small sacrificial acts may seem insignificant to us, over time, as we continue to say yes to God's will, we begin to transform, sometimes unbeknownst to us. These small daily Fiats provide a multitude of opportunities for us to grow in patience, in humility, and in charity, all the virtues that our Blessed Mother possessed in abundance. And looking back at it all, my family, my childhood illness, my mother's suffering, the loss of my parents, the founding of Divine Providence Home, just by the grace of God, I now recognize the hand of Providence on all of it. In times of suffering in particular, God has us in His loving embrace. And I want to quote one of my favorite books, and if you haven't read it, I recommend it. Many of you have probably already read it, but it's Father Jacques Philippe's Searching for and Maintaining Peace. And Father Philippe writes, "Do not anticipate the unpleasant events of this life by apprehension. Rather, anticipate them with the perfect hope that as they happen, God, whom you belong, will protect you. He has protected you up to the present moment. Just remain firmly in the hands of His providence, and He will help you in all situations. And at the times when you find yourself unable to walk, he will carry you. St. Thomas Aquinas said, "There is one thing that God wants of all intellectual beings, and that is to sacrifice their will to God's will. And there is no greater example of this than our Blessed Virgin Mary." Mary's suffering was unimaginable, yet she stood firmly. She knew that a sword would one day pierce her heart, yet she never worried. In thinking about Our Lady and all her suffering, Father Ripperger wondered why Mary was never wounded. In search of this answer, he turned to the writings, again, of St. Thomas Aquinas on the subject, in which the saint says, "A thing can only be wounded where there is resistance." And he goes into this just from a physical level, just talking about an outside force opposing another force. It's that opposition. So after reflecting on Aquinas' words, Father Ripperger gives a talk on this, and if you ever go on YouTube and search him, he's just incredible, and just provides just an abundance of information and insights into the faith. So Father Ripperger says, "Physical wounds are very much like psychological wounds and also spiritual wounds. We only become wounded because there is resistance to the pain. When there's resistance to the suffering, Our Lady never resisted the suffering. She fully embraced every single sacrifice, every single painful thing, and never once counted the personal cost. There was never any resistance in anything God ever asked of her. Anytime she is asked, her immediate answer is yes." So we are called to emulate Our Lady's radical submission and surrender to God's will. Easier said than done, right? Recently, I learned about a man that I was not familiar with, and a novena that I was not familiar with. So this is Italian priest, Father Don Dolindo Rotolo. And he called himself Mary's little old man. So he was a stigmatized mystic who died in 1970, and he's a candidate for beatification, and the church has granted him the title of Servant of God. So I recently discovered Don Dolindo and the prayers that he was given from Jesus, as recited in the powerful Surrender Novena. And in closing, I would like to share them with you all. Close your eyes and let yourself be carried away on the flowing current of my grace. Close your eyes and do not think of the present, turning your thoughts away from the future, just as you would from temptation. Repose in me, believing in my goodness, and I promise you, by my love, that if you say you take care of it, I will take care of it all. I will console you, liberate you, and guide you. Pray always in readiness to surrender, and you will receive from it great peace and great rewards, even when I confer on you the grace of immolation, of repentance, and of love. Then what does suffering matter? Is it impossible to you? Close your eyes and say with all your soul, Jesus, you take care of it. Do not be afraid. I will take care of things, and you will bless my name by humbling yourself. 1,000 prayers cannot equal one single act of surrender. Remember this well. There is no novena more effective than this. Oh Jesus, I surrender myself to you. Take care of everything. God bless you all.